Philip Lee. Coming up now.
Nine, two.
What? 33.1?
33.1. 9, 2, 4, axles.
I apologize for the lack of a proper introduction. Today was going to be an awesome action-packed day here at Pointed Rocks with Philip Lee, as him and I were very surprised to hear a westbound at Barnesville with 942 axles total. The dispatcher was lying trains left and right, mainly westbound here at Pointed Rocks, as I barely had time to set for Q217, which was the empty auto wreck you saw heading westbound in the previous clip. The train approaching us now is CS6E740, which has the 942 axles total, with 5 locomotives leading, followed by 228 empty coal cars, with a special surprise in the middle of the contest, in which I will point out as it approaches. No, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. That's really a New York Central Hopper 509er 367, which Philip Lee and I traced, and is still New York Central registered, not even CSX.
RTD 78607, West 42, clear, Point of Rocks, CSX 2717 now.
That New York Central Harper was a very rare catch for the CSX Baltimore division. Usually you'll find rare items such as that on a manifest, so catching it on an empty coal train was extremely rare. As CSX E740 proceeds westbound to Grafton, West Virginia, a local skirts off the main lines D786, bringing some rolling stock to Brunswick from Frederick and Mount Airy, so that Q415 and 16s, which are the mainline manifests that stop in Brunswick, can pick up and deliver the cars back to the customers with a slug set at the helm of the consist. Here's Philip Lee as he records the tail end of D786. As him and I thought the rail frenzy was over, the Metropolitan Subdivision ceases to surprise me yet again, as CSX U315 makes an appearance. U315 is another empty coal unit, originating from Cross, South Carolina, heading northbound, and then proceeding westbound after Washington, D.C. to Newell, Pennsylvania. Normally you don't see any T and U series coal trains, but they do come through the Baltimore division every once in a while, and it's still a pretty cool catch, especially this time of day, as they normally run through the Baltimore division, if they do, at night. After the passing of CSX U315, the line finally took a break until about 4:50 p.m. as Amtrak PO29, the westbound Capital Limited, approaches Pointed Rocks, Maryland on time with 36 axles total. During the slow season of travel, Amtrak cuts down the Capital Limited's consist so that way Amtrak can save the extra Superline cars and baggage cars and not wear and tear more than was really needed for passenger ridership. Today's westbound Capital Limited consists of 2 Genesis P42 DC engines, followed by a crew and transitional sleeper, a regular sleeper car, a dining car, a sightseer lounge with cafe service, a coach baggage, and a regular coach car, as Amtrak PO29 takes the medium clear here at Pointed Rocks, 1-1. For those of you who have never ridden on an Amtrak train, you're missing out on life. I personally love riding Amtrak, the sights you get to see, the service you get to enjoy, and the smooth ride you get to feel, and just the journey that awaits you on your next Amtrak trip. Back in December, I rode Amtrak Capital Limited from Chicago's Union Station to Washington, D.C. as my first Amtrak long-distance trip, especially on an overnight train. I slept in a roomette on the sleeping car for $350 one way. Wasn't too bad in my book. The ride was very smooth, and they offer complimentary snacks and drinks aboard if you ride first class or the sleeping car. You also get complimentary access to the Metropolitan Lounge and Club Acela for every purchase of first class, in which I took advantage of while in Chicago. I highly recommend taking the trip if you're an adventurous kind of person like me aboard Amtrak's Capital Limited. With that being said, traffic is starting to pick up very slowly as CSX B667 pops out of nowhere on the Metropolitan subdivision with a rare surprise leading. Well, rare for me because I haven't seen one in a long time as I don't rail fan as much as I used to, with 4793 in the lead. I'll let you figure out what locomotive that is leading.
Anything else coming?
It was starting to get pretty late here at Pointed Rocks, and there wasn't another train in sight. Well, except for CSX Q13806, which didn't have anything excited on, just another single-stack intermodal train heading eastbound towards Baltimore, taking the Metropolitan subdivision to the Capital subdivision. Must have no hazmats today, because he's not taking the old main line like he does sometimes around this time of night. Anyways, with the beautiful sunset, enjoy the last train of the night. Well, it's time to call it a night here at Pointed Rocks, Maryland, as I watch the moon rise from my camera as I plan what I'm going to do for the next day.
West number 1, track clear, North WB. North WB, West 1, track 29 out.
12 hours later passed, and I finally made a decision on where to go the next day, which is right here at Brunswick, Maryland. I finally woke my lazy butt up at 3 in the afternoon on the first day of daylight savings after Amtrak PO29 shows his face here at North WB. Amtrak PO29 has 40 axles with the baggage car added on today's consist, with the Genesis engines proudly storming westbound into the not-so-sunset. As Amtrak PO29 rides off towards Harper's Ferry and into the not-so-sunset, I look back eastbound at the signals and notice that the aspects changed for something lined to go into the yard for an eastbound train. The culprit is CSX B80108, a Brunswick-bound local originated from Winchester, Virginia, as they just got off the Shenandoah subdivision at Harper's Ferry and has waited for Amtrak PO29 to pass Weaverton, Maryland, so the B801 can cross over from track 2 to 1 east. Why doesn't he go into track 2? Nobody knows, as B801 is being pulled today by a slug set and an additional jeep as he heads into Brunswick with the restricting signal. Where we are currently standing would have been still part of the Brunswick Yard back in the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad days. Brunswick Yard is currently 2 miles long from East Brunswick to Maple Avenue, with rail action still very much alive as trains originate, terminate, and operate to this very day. Because of how many local customers are present within 50 miles of Brunswick, I highly doubt that CSX, with its future plans of PSR or Precision Scheduled Railroading, will shut down Brunswick Yard anytime soon. However, plans do tend to change, so try to appreciate as much as you can, as well as the history of Brunswick, as we try to preserve as much as we can. We prepare for yet another eastbound, but this time on track 2 at the South WB signal displays a high clear for CSX Q138, which is a few hours earlier than expected, as we enjoyed the extra hour daylight catching the eastbound single-stack intermodal with the rebuilt locomotive stuffed within the consist as a mid-DPU today. As soon as CSX Q138's tail end passes the interlocking here in South WB on eastbound track 2, the line was pretty much dead for a while as we wait for our next victim to be lined up by the BC dispatch. An hour passed as we finally had another alignment, this time for a westbound on track 1. In the meantime, let's take a look at the old Baltimore and Ohio train depot here in Brunswick, Maryland. In 1891, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad opened up the Brunswick, Maryland train depot, which was designed by Ephraim Francis Baldwin. Several years later, the building was moved from 17th Street into its current location on Maple Avenue. The station is a wooden frame building with stone walls up to the windowsills and features palladium windows in the roof dormers. At one point during the life of the B&O Railroad, Amtrak's Blue Ridge and Shenandoah routes stopped here in Brunswick, but eventually dropped the stops from the timetables and eventually stopped running the routes entirely until Amtrak created the Capital Limited, which today runs from Washington, D.C. to Chicago, Illinois daily. The Capital Limited does not stop in Brunswick today, however, it does stop at the next station west of Brunswick, in a historical town of Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. It's approximately about 10 minutes drive right here from Brunswick to Harpers Ferry. As Chris, Lucas, and I were having a little bit of fun while waiting for this westbound to come, CSX E73, a westbound empty coal train, finally makes an appearance here as he just about to call North WB, knocking down the signal, proceeding westbound towards Grafton, West Virginia, while making a stop at Cumberland for a crew change. hopes that the dispatcher would line up another westbound behind E783, we waited for a minute to see if the signal would change or remain red, but unfortunately it turned back into an approach, which for that signal is a standard automatic block signal aspect because of the next signal, which is a control point. A few minutes later, a locomotive that came off of CSX D782 pulls up to South WB and proceeds to the storage track about 200 feet away, awaiting for its next assignment.
I like this bell. Sounds like an actual.
On a typical Sunday evening, Mark will do some yard work and refill the locomotives in preparation for tomorrow's service, with GP39 H-2 number 73 moving some coaches around the yard as instructed by the yardmaster.
Oh. Clear Hobbs.
While Mark continued doing its switching, another clear is presented, this time for eastbound here at South WB, which will be for CSX Q136, yet another double-stack intermodal unit making its way towards Washington, D.C., where the train will turn south onto the R&P subdivision for Portsmouth, Virginia. Q136 was pretty lengthy tonight, as its head end clears East Brunswick with the tail end still visible here at South WB. As 136 proceeds east, the dispatcher lines W753 off the Shenandoah subdivision to Brunswick on track 4 from 2 at Weaverton, and runs CSX Q372 around them while W753 stops in Brunswick to swap the lead engine out due to mechanical issues.
I'll let the chief know. You gotta figure out your ETA into Baltimore.
It doesn't say anything. Let me think for a minute here. 4 hours to get across town there, BC. Over.
Okay, 4 hours from Brunswick to Bayview, alright?
Yeah, that's going to be closer.
Okay. Alright, I'll pass the line to the chief, let you know what they say there. C6BC dispatch projections on. C6BC dispatch Jacksonville, calling Q37208, engine 770, over.
372, go ahead and give us the good news, over.
I wish I could. He says you're taking a rest in Baltimore, over.
Alright, take a rest, Baltimore, understood, thank you.
Alright, thank you. C6BC dispatch Jacksonville's out.
Q37208, 770. DC2, clear South WB.
For the last month, C6 Q372 has been running with rare items within the rolling stock, like fallen flag boxcars, even though none were on this train tonight. As C6 Q372 rides on into Baltimore, we head over to watch W753 do the engine swap, as they tie down the rest of the train and will drop this locomotive into the yard and switch her out.
India. Fly. I'm going to fly India.
Yes, sir. Apply.
Fred coming down, welcome. Well, Dan. Okay, they went over to 14 there, Chris.
I thought they were gonna back up, but I guess not.
16032 16032
Good morning, man.
As the original lead locomotive detachment for W753, they have to call the dispatcher in order to get permission to get a signal to go into the south lead here at South WB signal. As you watch the signal here turn to a restricting to allow this locomotive to go into the yard. As CSX W753 does the locomotive swap out here at South WB, as they switch out for another locomotive in the 6th lead, we had Q137 sneak up on us, which the signal just changed to a clear, but then he went to a PTC emergency just before knocking down North WB. As you hear the conversation between the crew, the dispatch, and PTC operations to hear what's going on, and later on they will continue fixing the issue.
CSX BC dispatcher, Jacksonville, answer over. Yeah, sir, 13708, over. Yeah, Rich, I stopped here momentarily. PTC dropped out on us there between Pointer Rocks and East Brunswick. I slowed down the under 18. It didn't come in. It tells me it's waiting on a consist summary. I'm trying to get it pulled back in there, but stopped momentarily if you was wondering where we was at. Okay, stop due to PTC issues, over. Yeah, it's telling me it's trying to reconfigure it. Right now, it just brought up a new menu. It says, please wait for consist summary. Okay. Say, well, why don't you go back over to channel 8?
Yo.
I'll try to get a hold of the help desk and go from there, over. All right, very good, thank you. Let me know if that comes back up for you, over. Okay, just let you know as soon as we can figure something out. Thank you, C6BC dispatcher, Jacksonville's on.
The crew of Q137 finally found the problem of the PTC, as the consist configuration wasn't loading properly after they knocked down the Pointer Rock signal, and between Pointer Rocks and East Brunswick was giving them issues. By the time they left East Brunswick, they finally got to the point where they had to stop and slow down to fix the issue, which it finally loaded, and they're now on their way westbound towards Chicago.
CSX BC dispatcher, Jacksonville, answer, over. BC 13708, over. Go ahead. I never heard from them, but I did get it up and running. It's back active, and we're on the move there, over. Okay, sounds good. Back on the move. How long were you delayed for? Maybe 8-10 minutes. Okay, all right, thank you. CSX BC dispatch from 13708.
Positive Train Control, or PTC, was implemented on North American railroads about 5 years ago to monitor operation performances while a unit train is en route from their origin to their next destination, regulating train speed, consist performance, train traffic as directed by the dispatcher, dispatcher bulletins and messages, and many more operations that can be performed under PTC. PTC is actually a visual computer that's inside each cab or each locomotive and will tell you basically your route, any dispatcher information, or any other data that is being received or transmitted, and actually shows a map of your routing, of your next signals, speeds, and much more. Well, we had 2 clears. We had a medium clear for W753 with a brand new locomotive to finally pull out of Brunswick 4-2 as he proceeds eastbound to Bladensburg, and we have another clear signal for CSX Q371, a legend that I have not seen in over 5 years, as we first catch W753 departing after waiting approximately an hour as the crew was setting up their locomotive and their PTC consist. The dispatcher was just asking W753 earlier on what his plans were and how much time they're going to need and how much time will they have remaining, as W753 is unsure due to the heavy delay they took as they're switching out locomotives here at Brunswick, so they might not make it back to their cars. But best of luck to them, Godspeed, and be safe out there to Baltimore Division's finest crew members. As soon as W753 was out of sight, here comes Q371. Pretty short tonight as it departs from Baltimore. Doesn't make a stop here at Brunswick and proceeds westbound to Cumberland. This will be the first time I've seen Q371 in approximately 3 years. I remember back in the good old days here at Brunswick, where all the manifest IDs were always coming during the afternoons and the mornings, like Q371 always came through Brunswick around 9:30 in the morning, even though when PSR was implemented, all the schedule changes and everything pretty much departs a little bit in the afternoon, early morning, or very, very late. As now I catch Q415, another train I haven't seen in about a few years, as he pulls into Brunswick about to make his scheduled stop. Any train that is approaching Brunswick going into the yard has to stop, and the conductor has to set up the switches manually so that the train can proceed into the yard as ordered by the yardmaster on what track and which yard the train can proceed through, as Brunswick is split into 2 yards, an A side and a B side. That hissing sound that you are hearing from these train cars is the air brakes. What happens is, when a freight train typically stops, it makes it easier for the engineer to release the train brakes but apply the independent brake fully. The independent brake is the brake that controls just the lead locomotive only, so that way when the cars can proceed or when the train needs to move forward, the conductor and the engineer do not have to wait for the train to release all of the brakes, and that they can just release the head locomotive brake and proceed. Don't worry, this process is safe. I'd like to give a few big thank yous to Chris F. Railfan and the Western Maryland Guide for joining me on this nice journey here at Brunswick, as we finally have an extra hour of daylight to play around with trains with. Until next time, this is Tranks Productions. Happy trails.
That's every rail line now in America.
I don't care. It's stupid. It's the whole reason why they won't let steam engines on here.
Well, you can't put a computer screen. That's what? That's like putting wings on trains.